The year 2007 was a great year for Total War. And now you might ask why. There were no new Total War games in 2007, Andy. What the heck are you even talking about, man? You might just say. And you'd be partially right. 2007 was the year of Medieval 2's Amazing Kingdoms expansion. It was a year where Medieval 2 was elevated to the next stage, where the mods flourished and the future seemed so bright. 2007 was also the year of the announcement of a Total War game, which would signal a shift in Total War development and game philosophy, and from which we still see lingering effects today. This video is all about Empire Total War, the game which is both beloved and hated by Total War fans. There are many reasons for why one might feel either way, both back in 2009, when the game released, and now in 2022, an entire 13 years later. Well, I've been playing Empire off and on ever since, and despite not being my personal favorite Total War game, it's ironically the game in the series I have the second most playtime in on Steam. And that's why we're back here, for the newcomers and the old fans alike, to ask the age-old question: is Empire Total War worth it in 2022? We will be reviewing the game's mechanics, features, the big ups and downs, and even the missing content, all while factoring in two of the game's biggest mods for those who want even more of the game. I made a similar video a year ago, but that was more of a retrospective, and I figured Empire deserved its very own review as well. And my friend, if that sounds good to you, I really hope you leave a like, and if you want to support the channel, it would mean the world if you'd consider supporting the channel on Patreon or as a channel member, where every cent made goes back into supporting the channel. And now, Empire Total War in 2022. Empire Total War takes place in the 18th century, and portrays more or less the entire century as it unfolds. One of the biggest selling points of Empire was that it promised to take the Total War series not only into an entirely new time frame, but also bring the series into a more modern and revolutionary new age. You'll see exactly what I mean as we go, but the size, advancements, and scope of Empire becomes evident as soon as you open the game. There is a sizable amount of factions here, all present from the get-go. The faction selection screen also reveals another aspect of Empire, namely the global focus of this game. No longer is the focus solely on Europe and the Middle East, but factions all the way over in India are present here. And since some of the European factions are colonial empires, they stretch all the way to the Americas. All of this is of course reflected in the campaign map, where things really start to get crazy. This shot right here is when I understood how far Total War had come since Medieval 2, only a few years prior. Don't get me wrong, I still think the Medieval 2 map is gorgeous in its own way, but it is sadly beginning to show its age in more ways than one. The Empire map though? Not so much, as I honestly feel like it remains one of the most beautiful campaign maps to date, and somehow still manages to give other games a very good run for their money. Everything looks soft and sharp at the same time, we have some fantastic depth of field effects, and trees and coastlines both remain good looking. My favorite things here though are probably a mix of two things. First, the oceans themselves, which are massive and just still makes me feel warm inside by looking at it, and second are the flags and banners of our generals. There's so much new technology in Empire, and this is one of them. Creative Assembly essentially created an entirely new engine for realistic looking flags, which at least look as if they're responding to wind, a massive leap away from those static banners of the prior entries. But the beauty of this map isn't the only good thing about it. The scope of Empire's map is equally important in explaining why the game itself is so beloved. You see, Empire's map is the largest in Total War history by one standard of measurement, namely how much of the world it covers. From newly included Iceland and Norway in the north, we also stretch much further east now, including Persia and even the entirety of India. Over in the west we can play all over the Americas, on a separate theater of war that really makes this campaign come together, as so much of this map is ocean. This leads into an entirely new concept of smaller maps that are entirely naval-centric. There are no real provinces here, but these maps instead carry trade goods, where you can send your ships to. In addition to the vast oceans which cover each part of the map, these trade maps make for some unique hotspots, and for naval-centric powers, really shows you to showcase how powerful your fleet really is. Empire also innovates in other parts of the campaign, namely its administration features. Empire was the first Total War to offer a technology tree. Compared to those of today, it may look simple, but it's arguably one of the best in the entire series to this day. The reason for this is that instead of only offering minor increases to various stats, Empire's tech tree actually unlocks technology. This means that in order to actually gain significant advantages over your enemies, or indeed to simply keep up in the arms race, you actually need to pay attention to this, as simple innovations like bayonets and new cannon shot types make enormous differences on the battlefield. Even buildings must be unlocked here, but you can only do so by building and maintaining universities, and this brings us to one of my personal favorite Empire Total War features, the decentralized provinces. Empire offers large cities as before, and serve as your main avenues of establishing armies and administration. But the difference now is that each province also offers many smaller towns and resource locations. These are scattered across the world, and not only serve as opportunities for faster technology research through universities, but also as possible farms, factories, and even ports for increased trade. It's such a fantastic feature that was only really replicated in Napoleon and Shogun too, but because of the scale in Empire, it always seemed to function the best here. Other than the gameplay innovations they represent, I just love how they make the entire map feel so much more alive, and adds a vast number of hotspots and tactical locations one must both defend and attack. In this way, instead of just having a simple raid option like you do in the later games, you now have to actually go in and raid enemy settlements. What's more is that there are a ton such settlements that can emerge in the game depending on the settlement growth. And I absolutely love that Empire retains the realistic population numbers of the previous games. Other aspects of Empire are up for debate whether they are good or not, but I definitely think there are at least good sides to them. The trade system has been severely revamped, meaning that every resource now has its own value, and depending on the amount available. On the flip side, you can only ever maintain a certain amount of trade routes depending on your amount and level of ports. Now personally, I think the system is fun, as it makes trade routes more valuable, and makes building trade ports a strategic choice. But it definitely gamifies trade, so it's less open and free than in Medieval 2 for example. Additionally, we have a completely new government mechanic with ministers and actual opposition. It's a cool concept that they also have various traits, but I definitely think the feature is underused and in need of a revamp to really feel immersive and exciting. You kinda never have to actually deal with the government, so that's kind of a bummer. There's also no family tree, which is definitely lame in an age where royal families and succession wars were a real thing. Lastly, the diplomacy system is now much more streamlined, with a diplomacy menu rather than having us move diplomats around. This system works well enough in Empire because it was a time of more established representation in foreign countries, but this system has since been used in games like Rome 2, and I think that's a very bad choice. Likewise, the city system has been completely overhauled as well. We can no longer build what we want, when we want, because Empire cities always come with a certain amount of building slots in them. In the later games, this system gets fleshed out somewhat with the option of many more types of buildings to balance the cities out. But in Empire, the offering of building types is just so low to begin with, which makes for a less immersive and interesting campaign. It's a common idea that the Total War titles, especially on the campaign side, have been dumbed down since Medieval 2. In some ways, this arguably goes for Empire as well, but as you can see, there's actually a lot that was added. But while I would say that many of the most important things remain intact, there are indeed a few very disappointing aspects of Empire. For one, there are no real events in the game, even though we get many notifications about things happening. And this brings me to another video of mine, namely the one where I unpack what Empire Total War could have been like if the game had been allowed to develop for a while longer. The sad reality is that Empire's campaign was supposed to be so much deeper than it became, with tons more events, disasters, family trees and intrigue, a possible papal and Holy Roman Empire system, succession wars, and so much more. The Empire of our dreams looks like it was in development then, but was never made into reality. And considering how the game now just feels a bit too empty and directionless, it's a true shame. Empire's campaign is a mix of fantastic ambition and wasted potential then, but it's hard to deny that it at least tried to bring something new to the Total War series. And for that, Empire's campaign still piques my interest to this day, which is evident in my Empire Challenge campaign. But Empire innovated even more, with battlefields that completely changed everything, for better or worse. Instead of swords and sandals, we now have thousands of infantrymen carrying guns in the golden age of lining directly in front of each other, and surviving just long enough for the other side to die faster than you. It makes for a great spectacle though, and even though they might not be as intense as the more traditional Total War battles, there is something about the line warfare that just, somehow, fits the whole thing better? I don't know how to explain it, but because units aren't drinking coffee in a massive melee cafe, Empire just feels like there's more calculated tactics involved. Factor in the use of cannons and artillery, and you have the super weapons of the age, which not only incites fear in your enemies, but lends some amazing sounds and sight to the battlefield. Cavalry is also important, and a well-placed charge will change the course of battle. So at the end of the day, muskets aren't everything. We must of course remember the fort battles though, the bane of this game. And it happens to be that way because unit pathfinding in this game is at times completely atrocious and buggy, and these are aspects which have yet to be fixed at all. The AI isn't necessarily the best either, so much of the praise I've given here for Empire's battles are predicated on the terms that you're fighting in the field, and that the AI actually chooses to engage you properly. No matter where you play though, Empire Total War still offers some gorgeous visuals on the battle maps, And even though it's true that Napoleon is even more mouth-wateringly beautiful, Empire's visuals mostly hold up, especially when factoring in the massive leap away from medieval to's a bit more primitive old-school graphics. The final and largest addition of Empire Total War, however, is arguably the all-new naval battles. From being non-existent to a massive part of Empire, Creative Assembly somehow managed to make it big on the first try, with the naval battles arguably being the second best in the series after, again, the more polished Napoleon battles. For the first time, we can finally steer our own ships, see the sails and the flags fly, and hear the cannons roar. The battles do seem a bit more RNG based because everything is now reliant on whether the cannons hit the enemy ships or not though, but sound maneuvering will often turn the tide either way. These battles look and sound so cinematic, and because a massive feature of the grand colonial empires of the times were these powerful navies, having these battles be manually played really adds that sense of empire to empire. This is especially true as time goes on, as a larger empire and better technology will often mean bigger and better ships. And there's something about the back and forth of cannon fire from these massive beasts that remind me of the space combat from Star Wars. It's just awesome is what I'm really trying to say here. If you want more out of Empire though, you have several options, and I'm going to list two of those right now. The first is the all-time classic Empire mod, Darthmod. Darthmod adds a ton of playable factions to the game and upgrades several aspects, including more units, a revamped economy system, a new AI, and some awesome visual features that make the battlefields look much more like Napoleon's. The second is Empire 2, and if you want to, this is where you can really change things up. From new units to a revamped UI, visual effects, and factions, Empire 2 even includes a host of new features, like actual events and decisions. This gives us a hint of what Empire could have been in the beginning, and since Empire 2 is still in development all these years later, I'm sure we can expect even more from this mod in the future. Empire is arguably CA's most contested title alongside Rome 2, and it comes down to the change of engine, unfinished features, and lacking content. But if you manage to tolerate some of the downsides and broken siege battles, Empire is a total war game on a whole nother scale than before, and arguably, in some ways, compared to what came after as well. If you want to really feel like you're ruling a global empire while fighting those awesome trademark total war battles, this time on land and on the high seas, then Empire might just be the game for you. And because of how future-oriented the visuals and UI of this game was, Empire still holds up today. Thank you so much for watching. Empire was awesome in 2009 and remains awesome today, despite all the downsides, and despite missing the hot seat feature I suppose. Let me know how you feel about Empire, and if you enjoyed the video, I really hope you leave a like and consider supporting the channel further, either by becoming a patron or a channel member. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.